Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. I'm delighted today to be speaking to Sister Aisha, the Scottish revert teacher. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So, Sister Aisha is known as the Scottish revert teacher. She's a revert Muslim from Scotland, a mum, a student, a teacher, and self proclaimed dependent woman trying to convey the message of Islam to her country. Brilliant. So, today we're going to be speaking about feminism. Do we need feminism as Muslims, right? Do we actually need
Yeah.
feminism? So just to get us warmed up on this topic, firstly, why is the topic of feminism important to discuss today?
Well, we see it everywhere, don't we? We're seeing it in the content we take in, we're seeing it in our families, and we're seeing a lot of reactions to it as well, which is also causing us issues in other ways as well. So, yeah, these are important things to sort of refute.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. You do see it everywhere. It can definitely impact marriages, but also impact generally families. And then the negative reaction to feminism from some quarters, like the Red Pill movement, then push out ideas which are not necessarily anti-feministic alone. They almost
Mhm.
become anti-woman. They almost become just
Yeah.
they almost just become
Mhm.
like a male version of feminism in terms of their quite sometimes toxic
Yeah.
um, claims about women and stuff. So, Sister Aisha, um, you know, the question arises in the minds of the listeners that what is wrong with feminism, like as a general idea. There are other ideologies out there. There's socialism, Marxism, Darwinism, scientism, and all types of ideologies. What's fundamentally wrong with taking an ideology which is not from Islam? Doesn't Islam, allow this sort of tolerance and, these sort of ideas and cross pollination and this type of thing?
Well, I mean, like you just said, there's many other ideologies out there. Ideologies are ideas and their values that people implement into their life and they live by. You don't even need to dig very deep into feminism and liberalism and, the red pill and the like to see that a lot of it goes against our Islamic principles and values.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's really that simple. A lot of the feminist and red pill arguments are that, these help us understand, this, that, and the other much better than, but actually, this is just a display of ignorance and their lack of knowledge of their deen.
yeah.
Islam has everything that we need. We just need to dedicate our time, our efforts, sometimes even our money into learning it.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head by speaking about the fact that any ideology, liberalism, feminism, or whatever it is, fundamentally has values which are different to Islam. And also, if somebody says, "Look, I'm going to take the good from feminism and leave the bad from feminism," whether they say that about liberalism or Darwinism or scientism or anything, they're essentially implicitly implying that Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah has something missing. Therefore,
Mhm.
they want to take this thing and import it in. But like you said, it's a clash of values.
Mm.
Values are things that you live by. They're your identity. So you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't have this idea that you're a Muslim or feminist, or you're a red pill akhi, right? See,
Mm.
these things fundamentally don't work. It's the same as liberal Muslims, right? The supposed liberal Muslims, they're just rife with contradiction. So um,
Mm.
feminists would say, feminists would say, um, you know, at the end of the day, the Muslim women are oppressed. The Muslim women need liberation, and Muslims basically need feminism. And you, as somebody who was not a Muslim and then accepted Islam, and you're wearing a niqab in a country that, it's not like London. London is 10%
Mm.
Muslim, and London is very common. I mean, I think you lived in London, right? So you know how
Yeah,
common the
yeah.
hijab and jilbab and niqab is. And so you're making yourself a ghuraba, you're making yourself a stranger in the society. feminists would say, well, you're going backwards, Sister Aisha. They would say, you're supposed to be propagating feminism to the Muslim world rather than adopting their values. What would you say to this?
Well, I mean, it's laughable, isn't it? To be a Muslim feminist is an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. We as Muslims don't pick and choose, or we shouldn't. We do, but we shouldn't pick and choose what it is we want to practice and what it is we want to, take on and believe. All of this is a lack of tawheed.
It's basically a lack of iman, essentially.
Yeah, but iman comes from knowledge. Iman comes from understanding who Allah is, understanding Allah's might, Allah's attributes. Like, for example, in your introduction, I said that I'm a self-proclaimed dependent woman, and the reason I feel it's important to say that is because it's a fact. We are all dependents. We are creation. We are all dependent on something, whether that be food, whether that be each other, whether that be nature, or nature is dependent upon nature, Yeah. So feminism sells this false narrative that we can find independence. But actually, we as Muslims understand that we get independence through our dependence. We get independence through Allah. We get independence through Islam. Like you said, wearing niqab. I get liberation and freedom through my, hijab. Again, it's just a lack of not just the knowledge, but the connection with your Rabb. We're so distracted in life. We can say, yeah, but people have to work and people have families, but it's so much more than that. Social media is rife, TV shows. All of this is a distraction. Our time and effort, our prioritization should be our deen.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it should be. And, it does fundamentally come down to, like you said, we've forgotten the very purpose. We've forgotten why we're here. We've forgotten the bigger picture. And this reminds me of a sister who took Shahada with us some years back. And she came over to the office, and she was an atheist. And, her family was quite right-wing. And, she said something very interesting. In essence, she said that, feminism or these things about Islam is not fair to women because of this or this, or, all these things. She said, when you think about these claims against Islam in the grand scheme, in the framework of the greater picture of the Day of Judgment and God and, the hereafter and all of these things, it's such a trivial matter, right? It's such a trivial matter. I mean, at the end of the day, life is basically suffering. We go through suffering. We go through one problem through another. We go through different stages in life in which we are simply passing through one emotional trauma through another. Nobody has an easy life. Just yesterday, one of the brothers, Brother Ismail, who has this fantastic Quran. He had this fantastic Quran institute online. People have learned from it, benefited from it. At the age of 37, he died of cancer. I found out today that one of our volunteers, I didn't even know, but she actually passed away again. She was in her 30s. So the thing is, from the bigger picture point of view, these things that Shaitan is using to attract us, women, they should have the right to basically do this, and men have the right to be the imam, so the woman should be the imam, and all of these types of things. When you look at the larger picture, these things are really trivial.
We have a lot of people that say Islam means peace, but Islam means submission, and our dependence and our humility when we take on that dependence is submission to Allah. I think this is a part of the problem when it comes to feminism. It demonizes women who don't say, I want to be this independent woman, I want to, have this career, and I want to, make my own choices and live my own life and make my own mistakes, etc., etc. To the point where even now we as Muslim women, we look at a woman who solely just looks after our home and our kids, and we demonize them, we criticize them, we look down on them. It's absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. If we think about the Sahaba, if we think of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, are we looking down on them as well? Like, subhanallah, where have we gone to? You know, we really need to take a sort of hard look at ourselves. And that is a part of being Muslim through feminism and liberalism. We're told to, you know, live our best life. Everything is centered around the individual, but we as Muslims, we have a balance where we have, you know, that focus on the individual, but we also have that focus on the wider community. You know, that there's a lack of all that. It's everybody living for themselves, everybody's hypersensitive to any sort of criticism. You know, it's very messy, toxic, and blurred. And that is why, you know, these conversations and conversations about other ideologies are so important. We should be directing all of us to come back to the deen. You know, all of us should be helping each other increase our knowledge in the deen, so that we can rely on it. People are relying on feminism now. People are relying on red pill and other ideologies. But our reliance is through our deen. Our deen has the answers. The only reason you haven't came across it is because you haven't put that time and dedication into it. You know?
Absolutely. And it doesn't fundamentally lead to success anyway. So, you know, when these women are out there and they're basically telling other women who are housewives, you know, in the words of one of the feminist leaders, the house is a comfortable concentration camp for the woman, right? You know, the yoke of reproduction and all of these types of things that they actually use. Those same women in their 50s, when they're on tranquilizers, when they are in a high CEO position, they're on a high salary, but they don't actually have happiness. They don't have children. They did, you know, there's one woman who regretted feminism and some of the toxic feministic ideas that she had. Even though she still died as a feminist, she had some radical feminist ideas and she moved away from them to more moderate ones. She said, I mourn for my unborn children. She said, you know, it's crazy when you think about it, because, you know, it's part of human nature. You know, a woman, she wants to have children, a man wants to provide for a woman. And in many, many ways, you know, you said that feminists demonize the woman who's at home and she's just doing her basic stuff. Likewise, they also demonize the men. You know, men are trash, men are evil. Well, the fact is, yes, they are evil men, and they are men who are trash from the perspective that they catcall and they do these types of things against women. But at the same time, when the woman needs help, she'll also go to a man. So you can't have this. You can't have this thing where all men are trash. However, whenever there's a problem, then, you know, if there's a toxic male who's, you know, abusing women, you're not going to call another woman to deal with him. You're going to call a man to go deal with him. So, you know, these narratives are, they create hatred between the genders. And I feel red pill are like, you know, two sides of the same coin. They create this hatred between the two genders who should actually be complementary.
Yeah, if you analyze and observe the nature of men and the nature of women, that is Allah's wisdom that we are like that, and that's something that should be embraced. If we look at feminism, let's just assume that it came through good intentions because women in the West were having their rights breached from men for generations. You know, they didn't realize that Islam had all the answers and had all the rights there waiting for them. But I was talking to a friend about this the other day, but I said feminism is like the COVID vaccine, you know, because they didn't understand the long-term effects. But like you just mentioned, now we can see the long-term effects. Women are miserable. Women are not happier. It's that feminism is at the expense of women. It's at the expense of families. And that's not to criticize women. Men have a heavy, heavy role to play in that as well. Like there's another brother online called The Middle Nation, and me and a friend reacted to one of his videos that was called Feminism, Shamanism, and he was holding men into account for their role in their women's lives. So, you know, everybody has a part to play in fixing this issue. The Quran is our instruction manual. If you buy, you know, a complicated set of, you know, bunk beds or something, you're going to look at the instruction manual on how to build it and fix it and make sure that it's stable. And we have that as Muslims. We're really lucky to have that. Those women in the West back then didn't have that. And because of that, they have misled a lot of people for generations, you know, and now we are seeing the effects of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Um, I definitely agree with you about the long-term thing, because there are women who, say, example, in their 20s, they say, no, I'm not going to get married. I'm going to focus on my career. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. 30s, the same. And then what ends up happening is that they're like, okay, now I'm ready to get married. And then they're not getting any proposals. And those women, you find that they then start telling the younger women, don't make the mistake I did. But the younger women, they want to experience that themselves. They're like, no, I want to live my own life. I want to do this. And the sad thing about this is, ultimately, feminism and a society with, remember, feminism, it survives in the overall picture of liberalism. What does it actually lead to? In a feministic society like here in Great Britain, what do we have? What do we have? We have a situation where they are single mothers. And these single mothers, because the institution of marriage is not there, because, this idea that, women have to be respected, you can't just sleep with a woman, you have to marry her first, all of those things are out the window. So you get single mothers. And the mothers are supposed to be working, because the idea that the father works and the mother is there to take care of the child is gone, because the feminist ideology, which has been, imparted through the education system, has basically taught women, you do not have the right to take care of your child. You need to go and work in whatever shopping place and then come back and then take care of your children and do all of these things. And what else do we see? We see a massive rise in the objectification of women. And feminists don't have an answer to that. Feminists, they have this thing, oh, Muslim women, well, what about all those women who, they basically sell their bodies for adverts, and then you have this this entire industry. All of this stuff is absolutely humiliating to women, yet feminists are so adamant that is you, Aisha, with your hijab, and Khadija with your jilbab, you are the oppressed woman. But why don't they say the same about all these women who now, and this is very important to understand, they don't have protectors. The men are disregarded as protectors. So then when somebody comes up to a woman and then gives her an offer, oh, by the way, we have a studio and you'll get $200 for making this film and this and that, she has no protector. She has nobody that can tell her this is wrong. She has nobody that can feel that type of jealousy that somebody from their family is doing this. And overall, it leads to women being humiliated in society. And this is very important to understand, because let's look at the fruits of feminism, right? Let's look at the long-term fruits of feminism: unhappiness, objectification of women, and the most important, which is that the men get what they want, which is without marriage and all those things, but without any responsibility. The woman has to actually take care of herself and fend for herself and do these types of things. And basically, women, they get the worst deal. No wonder why Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy, the one who first came up with the magazine and then all the rest of the industry took over, he himself described himself like as a feminist. Why? Because if feminism did not exist, if there was what today we let's just call it the Islamic conception of masculinity, or generally, if you like, even the Christian concept of masculinity, if that was the prevalent paradigm of the Western world, Hugh Hefner would be out of work. He would not be able to grab someone's daughter and say, hey, stick yourself on camera, stick yourself in these pictures. He could not do it because of those values. So we have to understand that people who are truly suffering because of feminism are women.
Women, yeah. Well, it's hypocrisy, and it's always, I always find it really ironic when feminists say that they represent women and they're here speaking out for women, but I didn't hear one feminist, criticise, France for their hijab and niqab bans, or, any other country in Europe. I mean, so many now have banned the niqab. I have to, do research whenever I'm traveling because of it. It's ridiculous, you know. So because we're anti-feminism doesn't equate that we are anti-women's rights. I think this is the misunderstanding between even the Muslim community. If we say we are not a Muslim feminist, it's not because we are anti-women's rights, you know. It's we are anti-creation ideologies, we are anti-man-made narratives, that we stick to the Quran and Sunnah. This is what we have been advised. It's so simple, but we as people make it so complicated. True peace, despite whatever's going on in your life, true liberation, true freedom, true independence, all comes through that reliance and the guidance. You know, it really is that easy as long as you're striving, as long as you're prioritizing and putting that time in. Slowly, slowly, it will start to become you, and you'll start to feel that, and that will be the reality of your life. And there's nothing more freeing than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what could be more liberating than knowing that you no longer have to conform to societal pressures? You know, take British values. Values today are different to 20 years ago.
Mm,
Values from any particular culture, they change over time. You know,
mm,
as I think it's Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn, one of these guys speak about that you are the average of your five friends. Whatever values they have, whatever lifestyle they have, you're the average of that. So all that
mm,
societal pressure, we basically discharge that and say, no, actually, I'm going to do what's best for me, and what's best for me is what the Creator has decided. Because the Creator, I mean, if we look at feminism, and if me and you, Sister Aisha, we sit down with a feminist and we say, okay, do you know what, we agree to be feminists. Can you tell us the difference between the second wave and the third wave? Which one's right? Can you
mm,
tell us what is the definition of a woman? You know, can we get into the nitty gritty of responsibilities and these types of things? So they will have contradictions and they will have problems and mistakes. And because at the end of the day, even if we were to completely give up and say, okay, tell us what to do, they would still not know exactly what to do. Yet
yeah,
in Islam, we have crystal clear guidelines. And not only do we
yeah,
have guidelines, we have principles. So, for example, you know, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the best of you are the best to their wives. So
mm,
we know that in Islam, there is a spirit of the law and there's a law. There's a reasoning behind it. The man is supposed to be the maintainer and the protector. So, for example, Muslim feminists, they will be like, oh, it's so evil. It's so evil that Islam gives a man twice the share of a woman. Yeah, but the man also has the responsibility of taking care of the woman. Yeah, but the man also has the responsibility of making sure that his family is safe, and he
yeah.
should go out in society and do these things. And I think it's very
It's not
unfair.
only that, I think one misunderstanding of that is they assume that that's just the wife and the children, but that's also the mother. If the mother is not being looked after, the sisters, if the sisters are not being looked after. And if we look at Muslim families, they're huge. You know, the responsibility on men sometimes is a lot. And again, if we look at Islam as a life system, everything has a reason for everything. You know,
Yeah,
people make a lot of assumptions. Even Muslims make a lot of assumptions, and I think that's why we start to see people stray, because instead of actually looking into a topic, they just make the assumption that Islam hasn't got the answer, and then they look elsewhere. Even if there's a general rule, let's say, individual circumstances are taken into account, and flexibilities can be had within, you know, sort of rulings. So like, Islam is the balance that accommodates, like I said earlier on, the individual, the community. It really is, if just taken for what it is, if just committed to it, is everything you need. It's a breath of fresh air. I'm constantly, constantly humbled by Islam, by the Quran, by the Hadith. I see a lot of red pill Muslims right now going through books, red pill books on their channel. Like, what a waste of time. Like, pick up a book of Hadith, pick up the Quran, and then, you know, pick up a tafsir and sort of spread that. Like, it's such a waste of time. A lot of these books are written by non-Muslims who we don't say that we don't share every idea with non-Muslims, but this is not our source of reference. You
Yeah.
know, like it's ridiculous and it's a shame, you know, but when we are talking about this, anything we sort of say is genuine, with genuine good intentions and sincere, you know, concern for them as individuals, for the people they're responsible for, and the people they influence, and the overall community. We are Muslim. If one Muslim suffers, we all feel that, you know, that we all bear that responsibility to support and encourage and advise, and that has to be done with wisdom, and it has to be done with care, and you know, all the rest of it. But
Absolutely.
it's yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a very profound point when you were speaking, Sister Aisha, that, you know, it's not that we disagree with everything, but it's the
Mm,
reference. Why would you
yeah,
reference that? For example, we would agree with certain aspects of Red Pill, what they say. We would agree with certain aspects of what feminists say. So when feminists
yeah,
say a woman doing a job and a man doing a job, them getting unequal pay, that is unfair. We would say, yes, you're right. A red
mm,
pill person saying that actually it's a woman's role to actually rear the children and it's the man's role to actually work, we would
mm,
say, well, actually, yeah, that makes sense from an Islamic point of view. However,
yeah,
we don't want their references. We don't want red pills references, which is anchored in thin air, and we don't want feminism's references, which are also, you know, at the end of the day, in thin air. Where what is the anchor? The anchor for us is Islam, is the Prophet ﷺ, is Allah. They are telling us what is the right thing to do and what we should not do, and what is the spirit of the law. What is the spirit with which a man and a woman should interact? I mean, take something very beautiful, right? In Islam, a man is not allowed to be with a woman in an enclosed area. Now, a woman, a feminist can say, well, you know, I'm strong as a man. I can deal with a man. I can do this. I can do that. But practically, we know what happens. If there's going to be any form of abuse, it's more likely to be from the man towards the woman than the other way around. And this is the sad thing about the workplace. And I was reading something on the BBC about abuse by men against women at workplace. The thing is, at the workplace is that, you know, some of this abuse cannot be documented because it's to do with things which are implicit, things to do with unwarranted comments, which could go either way. I mean, how are you going to take someone to court for that? Someone giving you, I mean, I saw this poster recently, you know, that staring is a form of what's it called? Sexual harassment, and catcalling is sexual harassment, which obviously is. But someone may think, well, how is staring? Islam tells you no, you have to lower your gaze, right? So
mm,
the thing is, we look at the reference. The reference for us is Islam. And you know, you said something, and I want you to, Sister Aisha, elaborate on this. You proudly and happily state that you're a dependent woman. And this is, if you like, one of the easiest way to trigger a feminist,
mm,
right? Why are
yeah.
you so proud of calling yourself a dependent person?
But it's a fact of life, you know, to say that I'm independent, I'd be lying. And this is, and I'm not saying feminists are intentionally lying, but there's definitely an ignorance there. We are all dependents, man, woman, kids, elderly. Nature is dependent upon nature. The grass is dependent on the rain, and you know, the rain is dependent on blah blah blah. You know, like everything, we are creation. Now, me personally, I didn't want to talk too much about myself, but just a little sort of look into my background. I was I had to leave the family home at a very young age, 14. I did not have a wali. You know, I was homeless by the age of 16. You know, so I sort of raised myself. I looked after myself. Now, Allah looked after me. You know, alhamdulillah. Um, but I know and understand the fears of women, let's say. Like I said, I never had a wali, and you know, even my husband now sometimes bears the effects. I've worked, been a working mum and a student, took on responsibilities that Islam commands the man to take on. I did that through the reasons of necessity, but it is a heavy, heavy burden to bear to do the mum role justice, to do the job role justice. All of that is a lot. And to be honest with you, one of my sons has a disability, so I'm not working anymore. I'm caring for him. But now to look back, and I'm still feeling the effects of those burdens. And alhamdulillah, I'm in a situation now where I'm looked after. Through feminism and other things, this is weakness.
Yeah.
You know, it is the most liberating thing to say, to be cared for by another human being. And it's really hard when you have been raised in a way when told you need to look after yourself, you need to fend for yourself, you need to get your own house and money. And this is why I really look at men differently over these past few years, because I've learned what having a wali means, having someone to care and look after you means. And it's amazing that a lot of women don't have that, or fearful to allow men to take on those roles. Let's just say what it reflects is a lack of tawakkul. You know, we as Muslims, first of all, we know our purpose in this world is to worship Allah and to work for the akhirah, you know. But if we're constantly worrying about, you know, this might happen and that might happen and that might happen, and we need to protect ourselves this way, and we can't lower our guard, and we can't be vulnerable in front of the other person, and that sort of thing, it does have a negative effect on your mental, physical, and spiritual health.
Yeah.
You know, and I would even say for the men, this is, you know, relevant in other ways as well. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think you've summarized it really well. And it's a real shame that, you know, while there's women out there who don't have a wali, who are unprotected, who feel financial insecurity, physical insecurity in some cases, then you have other Muslim women who are affected by feminism, so that they actually disrespect the wali. They make fun of the wali system, and they say, I want to go on holiday to Morocco, I don't need no wali, I'm an independent woman. You know, all that garbage, absolute garbage, you know, complete disrespect. So what it ends up doing is it ends up creating a situation where the man himself says, well, I don't need to be a wali, you know, I take care of my own life, you know, my sister or my daughter or whatever, they do their own thing, I do my own thing. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, from a woman's perspective, she has to also realize that it's not easy being a wali, because like you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned this, is that the financial strain on the man is immense. He has to basically take care of the entire household, including his mother, his daughters, his sister, his wife. And then sometimes also the man is responsible for helping other men. So, you know, you got all that responsibility. And if the woman has this attitude of disrespect towards the man will then show even greater disrespect. Now, of course, this is all under the pretext of a wali being sensible, a wali being religious. You have people who abuse, you have people who do this. But the beautiful thing in Islam, we have a system of dealing with that. We don't have this thing where, okay, if someone's abusing a woman, someone's not letting her marry and just taking her wealth. And no, she has ways that she can adjudicate these types of problems. What's important is, let's look at who is coming from. Islam's application, when you apply it, you're obviously going to have some problems. You're going to have some people who are corrupt, and you'll have injustice happening. Same with feminism. You can have the most egalitarian ideas, you apply them on paper, you get these problems. But the fact is, look at where the sources is coming from. The Islamic system is more likely to lead to justice because it's fundamentally coming from the all-knowing, perfect creator. So imperfect human beings are trying to apply it, so you're going to have problems. But if you have something that's from creation, that's from thin air, when that's applied by imperfect human beings, you get this evilness. Now, I just want to highlight something to you, Sister Aisha, that there was a debate some 10 years ago, nine years ago exactly, that happened. A debate was between Hamza Sotzis and Lawrence Krauss. It was a very famous internet debate. It's about, I think, 5 million views. It's all over the internet. It's considered the most popular debate with Muslim atheist polemics. And what's interesting is I was in that debate, and Lawrence Krauss walked in, and he was being riled up by his people who were claiming that, you know, this event is segregated when it was not segregated, and all these just outlandish things being said. And he himself was, you know, basically saying, well, I'm going to walk out. And, you know, he, in the talk as well, he was talking about, you know, Islam's immoral stances, and, you know, just saying these things about how Islam treats women. And, you know, he also said something about something really crude about niqabis. I don't remember what exactly he said. But, you know, all this stuff where he's pretending to be some sort of lion for the feminists, a lion for women's rights, yet he himself was discovered to be abusing women when he had authority, when he was at university. And actually, I don't want to go into the details. People can find them on the articles that are written about him. And these are things which have, which, you know, he's responded to. So these are things which are out there. So here's a person who's claiming, do you know what? You know, he's there for women's rights, he's there for this or that, but in his own personal life, he does the same thing. Likewise, there's another guy, David Silverman. He's the president of the American Atheist Association. Again, somebody who, you know, he's given a talk about fighting Allah, and, you know, he's not fighting God, fighting Allah, literally. And the guy talks about women's rights and believe every woman and all of this stuff. And again, with him, the same thing. He took advantage of vulnerable women. You know, he was involved in indecent sexual advances towards women, all this stuff. So you find this time and time again. These people, Hugh Hefner or Lawrence Krauss or David Silverman, all these men who are claiming to be feminists, when they have power, when they have quwwah, when they have the opportunity, they are abusers. Why? Because fundamentally, they are not coming from a position of faith. They're coming from a position of feminism, which itself is based upon thin air. There's no spiritual consequences for these things. So I want everybody to realize, and maybe if you can highlight this point in a bit more detail, it doesn't matter what feminists claim. In real life, women are suffering because of what feminists are propagating in society.
Yeah. I think it's important to point out, just based on what you just said, that earlier on I said, let's say, feminism began with good intentions, but it's very much used as part of many different people's, mainly elites, agendas. And like you said, the victims are women, and everything has a ripple effect. Everything. I had my own experiences. I was raised as a non-Muslim. I was, you know, indoctrined with these ideas. I never got any inner peace. It was very much hardship all the time. And I think one thing that is frustrating about feminism is you know, there's this narrative that it feeds that women can achieve and have it all. But no one can achieve and have it all. No one. Like you said earlier on, life is a test, you know, the suffering comes with it. But it's how we handle that suffering. It's our perspective on that suffering. It's our gratitude for the things that we do have and not focusing on the things that we don't. And all that stems from Tawheed, you know, religion. Just look at society. Has feminism protected women on the streets at night? No. Has feminism protected women in the workplace? Like, we had the Me Too movement merely a couple of years ago, and we are still seeing many things coming out of, you know, many different places, the same narratives of women being victims. Now, this is why, you know, Islam puts boundaries in place in every aspect of life. Islam is a life system from our creator, the being that knows us best. You know, it knows the nature of man and knows the nature of women, weakness in man and the weakness in women. And this is why all these boundaries are in place, so that we can live our best life, you know, by the true guidance, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, nothing will give you peace except what comes through the Creator.
Nothing.
Nothing. And
it's constant, subhanAllah. Even if you read the Quran 100 times or the tafsir 100 times, that you still stumble across things that just blow your mind. And it is even taking on our roles, let's say, because we're talking about this ideology, taking on our roles, like a man taking on his role, you know, providing for his family, working, you know, doing his best, and all these things fulfills a man. And a woman as well, you know, looking after her man. And I don't care what any woman says, we do get fulfillment from that, as much as we're told we don't put our guards up. And that's why I was talking about vulnerability earlier on. Feminism tells women to raise their guard up against men, and red pill tells them to raise their guard up against women. And how does that help us come together? It doesn't. But Islam does focus on yourself. Like, I was reading a Quran verse that says, verily Allah will not change the condition of a people as long as they don't change the state of themselves. The context of that in the tafsir is communities of straying from the deen. And we see a lot of that today. We see a lot of it in cultures, and that's why people have relied on feminism and the like. But it also, the tafsir also talks about, you know, the person changing the condition of themselves. So we need to start with ourselves, increase our own knowledge, try to, you know, better our character. And we're all work in progress. It's not about finding the perfect person or being around the perfect people. It's just being around people who strive, who at the very least have the basics and are looking to grow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you've summed it up well. And there's another thing I wanted to actually ask you. I think you've touched upon it before, but it's worth going into a bit more. Is what can our community do to overcome relying on this ideology and others like it? The Muslim community. How can we tackle this?
Well, I speak for my experience, and what helped me first and foremost was getting to know Allah and focusing on studying Tawheed. I think it all starts from there. And this is what we tell reverts to do, right? Why is that? Because if we have an understanding of Allah, if we understand, you know, the oneness, you know, Tawheed or Rububiyyah, if we understand his name and attributes, you know, the fact that he is our protector, our provider, you know, he is the judge, and, you know, everything else, and then we understand our acts of worship, this will help us connect with, you know, Allah. Everything after that becomes easy or easier. You know, as we develop and grow, as that connection, as our Iman develops and grows, things will get easier, even if our conditions are in dire need. A lot of people in Syrian refugee camps, you know, if we speak to people who are suffering, what do we see? We see gratitude, we see Tawheed. We still act as if, you know, we have no idea of what's going on the other side. We have no idea of suffering. You know, we should be in touch as Muslims. You know, we should know better. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his life, the Sahaba's life, you know, what they had, even scholars, you know, sheikhs after that who carried Islam to today, what lives, you know, did they have? Masses of followers, you know, even prophets, subhanAllah. Some prophets didn't have any followers, you know, but ridiculous. You know, we should know better. And we should humble ourselves. And again, if we look at the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, they who have believed and who have done righteous deeds and humbled themselves to the Lord, those are the companions of paradise. You know, so us being defensive or being scared to call ourselves dependents, that is something that we need to figure out, because that is a reflection of what we've been conditioned to believe. But this is an important part of being Muslim. We have to submit with humility. We have to submit with faith. And that doesn't mean dependence equates weakness. Many Niqabis I know, not one of them have I met who has a weak mentality, who is scared very easily, who you know, who is oppressed. You know, strength comes from, again, that belief in that dependence. Fulfillment, peace, good spiritual and physical mental health comes from that guidance, comes from submission, reliance on the Quran and Sunnah.
Absolutely. And the proof is in the pudding. you know, why is it that Muslims who are practicing Islam, who are upon the Sunnah, who are living lives that the feminists or say the high value men from Red Pill would say is tedious and boring and pathetic? Why is it that they're happy? Why is it that they're not on tranquilizers? Why is it that they are content to wake up in the morning and make a cup of tea and take care of their children and take them to the park, and they're comfortable with these things? And other people, they are constantly like, oh, we need to go to this party, I need to go get this business done. Like, they constantly need to fill their lives with something so much bigger than the tedious aspects of day-to-day life, because internally they're dead. So they need the new high. They need the okay, I couldn't get into this club, so I'm going to go talk to this guy. Like, these people, ultimately they are not happy, which is why they behave so erratically. It's like this. I was listening to this I don't know, video, whatever it was, in which it said, actually as an audiobook, that you don't look at the fighter who's aggressive, right, just before a fight. That means he's basically nervous. You look at the person who's calm. You look at the person who, before getting in a boxing ring or MMA ring or whatever, they're just calm, they're just relaxed, right? So you take a Muslim who dies upon Islam, like our own Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When he is dying on his last day, what's he doing? He's using the miswak, right? He's doing something small. He's brushing his teeth. And you find these kuffar who are, they are getting old now and they are billionaires. They are looking into all this type of technology that can make them look younger, make sure that they don't die, download their brain onto Google Drive so they can live on. And they constantly, the last day of their life, they're like going crazy, spending all their wealth trying to stay alive. And here you have a man who's content. He's content in dying. So Islam, what do we have? We have a narration of Prophet ﷺ which teaches us that death to a believer is a gift. And in Islam, we embrace death. We embrace life. We embrace the actual truthfulness of this life, which is ultimately a test. And one of the analogies which I love is that, Islam, if you imagine Islam is a coach and the person is a fighter, Islam is a coach talking to a fighter. And you also have liberalism or hedonism or feminism, anything man-made, right? Which is, if you like, even what the Quraysh believed in, this type of thing of just living your life to its full extent, FOMO, right? So YOLO. So you have the liberal coach telling the person, when you get into the ring of life, you are going to have the ability to have all the pleasure in the world, and you're not going to have problems, and you can just basically live your life and be happy, and just do. And they get punched and they go through difficulty and they go through trial and they go through all these things. Then you get Islam, which says to the person that's about to go into the ring of life, you are going to face difficulty, you're going to face challenges after challenges, you need to be patient, and whatever you have, you need to be grateful, and ultimately understand that your abode is paradise if you pass this test. Islam gives you a realistic framework. Now, sister, you were telling me last time when we were doing the live that you were living in this homeless shelter, and you were looking out the window, and these men outside the window were saying, we're gonna get you. Like, imagine if you heard one of the, because you were a young woman at the time and you were vulnerable. If you went outside, all sorts of things could have happened to you. Imagine if you saw a man walking into that hostel or wherever you were staying and saying to one of the young women, out there is fantastic, they're having a street party, they're giving out free drinks and free food, you're going to be fine, go on, get out there. You're going to be horrified, Sister Aisha. You're going to be telling her, listen, don't go out there, it's dangerous, it's difficult, you need to maybe have protection before you go out there, you need to be careful, you need to wait for daylight, whatever it is. This is what liberals do, this is what feminists do, this is what Darwinists do, this is what these people do. They're telling you, get out there in the world and don't worry about God, do what you want, do what you like, you're going to be happy. And ultimately people get bitten, broken, and to the point where they end up just taking drugs, right? They end up just ruining their life. How many people are addicted to alcohol? How many people are addicted to endlessly scrolling?
Well, that's their release from life, isn't it? That is their release from their troubles. That's their distraction. Their content, their movies. None of that is enough. And when you were speaking about how these narrative condition us and things they sell us. Like you really just described a non-Muslim's upbringing. You know, I was conditioned to believe that I could achieve anything as long as I did this, that, and the other. I would be fine and comfortable and all the rest of it. And then circumstances made it so that at 14 I was homeless, and then again at 16 I was homeless. Like 14, I ended up going to a family's house. But then 2 years later, that an illness took over the main person in that household, and I was actually homeless, and I was left to looking after myself. Through Allah's protection, that I'm still here today, a same person, that I didn't get wrapped up in a life where it was influenced by drugs or by negative people or evil people. You know, I was really fortunate, alhamdulillah. You know, we see people when they find out about Islam and the stereotypes are washed away, but you see people as understanding the wisdom and how that connects to our fitra, you know. And that's usually how people end up accepting Islam, because everything just makes sense once the time has been given to understanding it. Life is here to test us in one way or another. You know, whether that be through poverty, whether that be through richness, whether that be through health, like you were speaking about a brother, may Allah have mercy on his soul, may Allah grant him Jannah al-Firdaus. I mean, you know, he died at 27. You know, it's so young. 37, sorry, I thought you said 27. But it's still incredibly young, incredibly young. Life is not guaranteed, and we as Muslims have been given the guidance and the wisdom that we are here to prepare for the next. Yeah. And if we found out that we only had a year to live or a week to live, our priorities would not be, you know, living, you know, that to the fullest, in the sense that we're going to go, you know, abroad and, you know, fly on fancy sort of first class, you know, or drive fancy cars, or, you know, do all these materialistic and artificial sort of enjoyments of life. It would be spending time with family. It would be spending time in prayer. It would be, you know, giving to charity. It would be making sure that we have dealt with our worldly dealings in a way that is pleasing to Allah. You know, and all of that, at the end of it, inshallah, we should have in our peace readiness to take on the next stage of life, you know.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful way that you've summed it up, because this is something we mentioned in the beginning as well, that you have to look at the whole perspective, the larger picture. From a larger picture point of view, feminism has nothing to offer. Obedience to Allah has everything to offer. In life, you're going to go through the pain of discipline, or you're going to go through the pain of regret. Both of them are painful. To stop yourself getting into a haram relationship is discipline. But if you do get yourself into a haram relationship, you'll have regret. Same thing with drugs, same thing with anything else. So anything that is a disobedience to Allah and His Messenger is you not being disciplined. And likewise, the sisters who fall for feminism, or the brothers who fall for red pill, they are choosing their desire, their lower desire, over Allah. Every single day we face the battle between discipline, the pain of discipline, the pain of following our desires, and the regret of following our desires. We wake up for Fajr. Our desire is telling us go to sleep. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Likewise, you have money in the bank and you think to yourself, should I give to charity or not? Again, you have to be disciplined. So the fact is, Islam gives you the ability to choose the lesser hard. Life is hard. You're choosing between one type of hardship or another type of hardship. Islam is the least difficult hardship, because we hope from Allah what the other side can't hope. Those feminists or liberals or Darwinists or Muslims who've fallen for those ideologies, when they go through tests and trials, they have nothing to look forward to, but the believer does, because the believer puts their trust in Allah more than they put their trust in any of these man-made ideologies, which are basically telling them, you'll have peace if you do this. You'll have peace, like you mentioned, if you're traveling on a first class airplane and you're going to this country or that country, and you're going to a party and everybody knows you there, and all these things that they've instilled in our brains from the time that we were young, all of these delusions And it's so liberating. It's so liberating when you know you don't have 5 masters. You don't need to please society and then please your friends and then please your own your own desires. You just know that you have one master. And as we know in Islam, it's so much easier to have one ultimate master than have many masters which are quarreling, because that's the fact of life, that if you follow any of these ideologies, you still don't have guidance.
Yeah.
Still don't have
I
clarity
also,
what you need to
I
do.
also want to touch on something you just mentioned. Like, it is important to understand also at some point there's going to be regret for our choices. We're all sinners, we all make mistakes, so everybody's going to have a level of regret. And if we fall into bad habits, if we fall into sinning, we have to understand that it's so much harder to come out of it once you've been in it. So it is important. It's like almost like sort of when we are teaching our kids on how to defend themselves and they're, apprehensive to defend themselves. It's like teaching them that you really need to have your guard up and ready to fight anyway, because either way you're going to face this issue. Like if your kids get bullied or something, it's sort of feeding them that bravery and giving them those characteristics that Islam teaches us, that Islam tells us to instill in ourselves, that fearlessness, that humbleness and kindness, but also that fearlessness when we need it. And a part of that is to say, I really want to do this and this looks really, really appealing to me, but do you know what? This is not good for me. So I need to sort of fight that feeling, because once you're in it, it's really hard to come out of it. And all of us are going to go with some sort of regret. So it's best to try and make it so that it's as little regret as possible. Everything has a ripple effect. So anything you choose to do, especially as when you're younger, it will have an effect on you long term. Like
Yeah.
you said, those women who were creating feminism are now, 50 years on, realizing that it was at their own expense. Now they're made choices that they can't undo. Allah tells us through the Quran, we are the best of nations. Why is that? Because we've been given His guidance. We have a head start, let's say, and making better choices. Looking at the Sahaba, looking at the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, looking at the best of examples, taking inspiration from them, and really working on your own character so you're able to take life on, and then sharing that with your kids, sharing that with your spouse, and sharing that with your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really wonderful way of actually summarizing the topic. So Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha, for coming onto the live stream to discuss, do we need feminism? Is there any other last message you want to give to summarize the topic?
I think just a way of combating feminism and other ideologies is that Muslims need to come together. Men and women need to come together. Now, I don't mean free mixing, obviously, but we really need to understand that everybody has a part to play in fixing this. Everybody. We all have a part to play. Women need to, recognise the guidance and the duties being given to us by Allah, and the flexibilities within that, within reason. And the same goes for the men. Men really need to take on their roles as well, and men really need to sort of take into consideration women's nature, and there has to be, again, kindness and selflessness and genuine care on both sides so that we can actually undo the damage that some of these ideologies have caused us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And switch off your TVs and your phones.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this thing about helping each other as Muslims, say going back 20 years ago, we were being bombarded with, messages from TV, and all you simply had was direct indoctrination, right? Now, with the advent of the internet, you can find those strangers, you can find those Muslims who have the same beliefs as you, the same values as you. There's a channel I believe you're on, it's Niqabi Diaries or something, right?
Yeah.
Something like this 20 years ago would be unthinkable. I remember London from like the 90s, right? Or even the early 2000s. The idea of, so many women in hijab was unthinkable. Yet we find this, this change happening. So of course the times are getting worse, but we also have this ease that comes in. You know, 30 years ago, the fitna was less, but at the same time, it's very hard to gain knowledge. Now you can sit at home and you can basically gain the knowledge that you need to in order to be a Muslim. So many Islamic channels, so many sources of khair. So the fact is, we should always remember that, when Allah is giving us this choice in which between choosing good and evil, there's always the choice of good alongside these choices of evil. And I just want to end upon something. There's a tweet that just came to mind, and I just wanted to share this with you because you mentioned something along this line that, look, you're going to go through regret. If you make those bad choices. There was a Muslim sister, who got into a haram relationship, and she spent a good 10 years with this guy. And then after all that time that she gave him, her youth and her time and her heart and everything, he basically dumps her, and then he goes to basically marry somebody else. So, that woman, that was her test. Her test is, are you going to be patient, or are you going to get into a haram relationship? And she chose the haram thing, and it eventually led her to a place of misery and pain, as opposed to if she was disciplined. Even if she did not have a husband, that would be better than the situation she's in now, because she just gave this man 10 years of her life, the best years of her life, her 20s, right? And what did she get in return? She got betrayal. So the thing is, this life, even if you choose, Shaitan's telling you there's a shiny object, come towards this object. When you go towards it, you're going to get burnt, because this life, even a person who wants to disobey Allah, they will still get pain and regret and depression and absolute humiliation in this life. So the fact is, choose your hardship, the hardship of discipline, the hardship of submission and humbleness before Allah, or the pain of regret through hedonism. So either way, your life is hard. You might as well choose the lesser hard.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you've made. We need to understand that when we say, rely upon the guidance, go to the Quran, this is your source of reference, don't look at other things. We're not just saying it because it sounds nice, we're saying it because there's a reality that comes with it. We are told not to take drugs and alcohol, for example. Why? Because it has an effect on our mental and physical health as well as spiritual health. When we are told, to like men are told to look after their women, there's reality to that, because if you you just need to look, when women don't have that protection, they are taking advantage of majority of the time, so it's really important that we again understand that there's a reason behind the guidance, and that reason, some of it we can grasp and the rest is with Allah, the wisdom is with Allah, but we move forward with humility, humbleness, submission, a willingness of dependence, and we take that with gratitude and honor. I'm honored to be a dependent woman. I'm honored to call myself a Muslim. I'm honored to wear hijab. I'm honored to pray. These are gifts. These are blessings. And it's everything if you just grasp it, stripping all those artificial conditionings that we've been fed through movies, through the negative aspects of culture, through experiences as well. Like, experiences have a lot to do with this as well, but we, like many sisters, the red pill, for example, they say don't don't marry a divorced woman because they're going to bring their trauma to the next marriage. And although I would never agree with such ridiculousness, we do have to take into account that our experiences do shape our reactions and everything else. But what do we go back to? We go back to the Quran. It's the Quran that teaches us that despite our experiences, feminism is not the answer. Despite our experiences, liberalism, red pill is not the answer. The Quran, the Sunnah is everything we need, and we need to take a step back and have tawakkul. We have to have trust in that.
Absolutely. That's a great way of summarizing the topic. So Jazakallah khair, Sister Aisha, for joining this live stream. You enlightened us with the real ugly face of the consequences of feminism, not just, you know, the pretense, the veneer, the beautiful picture that they try and give, but the actual real life consequences of feminism. So until next time, anyway, everybody watching, Jazakallah khair. Please do follow Sister Aisha's channel. I've actually tagged it in the title to this video, so you could actually click on that title, go to her page, subscribe, and show some support, because she's doing some really fantastic work. And she's out in the jungle. She's out in the middle of nowhere. Well, from a Londoner's perspective, anything north of Watford is out in the sticks. But wearing the hijab, wearing the niqab, standing up for Islam, giving dawah in a remote place where Islam is not as visible as London or other places in the UK, you know, is something that is commendable. So may Allah bless you for that, sister. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.